Hello, dear viewer. Today I'm apparently turning myself into a commentary channel. I've probably put some gameplay in the background because I'm in the process of updating the channel's visuals and, well, I don't have time to make a regular looking video. This is a topic that I've wanted to talk about for a while now and, well, now feels like the best time to discuss it. Today's topic is about the content pipeline and behaviour's continual cycle of introducing problems more quickly than they can solve them. At the time of writing, Behaviour have just released the Sinister Grace chapter, and it is, frankly, so boring I'd rather be writing this script than playing with the new content. And that hasn't happened for a long while. To be honest, dear viewer, I'm not happy to be writing this script. Usually I'd love to be talking about a rework concept. The one I'm working on at the moment is my pig rework concept, which I'm very excited for. But I think this is a much bigger problem, and a far more important topic of discussion. So, what's the point I'm making? Well, dear viewer, today I want to look at the last year of content releases and highlight how the continual flow of content, with a capital C, displays Behaviour's inability to solve problems faster than they create them. Let's start with last year's release, Doomed Course. This chapter was unpolished at release. The Houndmaster was perhaps the single buggiest release of a killer ever, and there's some steep competition. So, whilst any release has some bugs, this release was so poor that the Houndmaster basically didn't release until a few weeks after her release. But in the meantime, you could use her teachable perks, right? No. Two of them are so bad there is never any reason to use them at all, and her third is fine. It's also not that interesting. Well, just play as the survivor, right? Yeah, let's take a look at her teachable perks. Treacherous Crows is so bad I'd unironically say it's worse than No Mither, the memeiest of meme perks. Shoulder the Burden is incredibly poorly designed. It has such a high skill requirement to use that most non-competitive players using it are basically throwing their matches. And then there's Clean Break, which is, again, fine, but honestly not that interesting. And for some reason its description is really unclear, unless you already know how it works. So, with this single chapter we have a killer so buggy she needed to be patched over several weeks before being playable. Even after being patched, her power has several questionable aspects and some add-ons so bad they're insulting, and 4 teachable perks that need major buffs or simply a complete rework in order to be viable. And what has Behaviour done about these issues? Nothing. But don't worry, you know what Behaviour has instead? More content. Tokyo Ghoul was the next release, and with it we got another killer and 3 new teachable perks. If we look at the Ghoul, his design is, well, controversial to say the least. He's a popular pick to play as, but frankly, he's obnoxious to play against, and has very little counterplay. Compound this with a sky-high pick rate, and there's a whole lot of people who aren't enjoying their survivor matches, myself included. Which leads me to playing even more killer and doing my part to increase the killer queue times. But during those times you were using those new teachable perks, right Cameron? Absolutely not, dear viewer. Here we have a perk so bad it genuinely baffles me that they released it in this state. It actually feels like an original perk that was made when the game first released, like Iron Grasp or Insidious. Then we have a hex perk that's Rapid Brutality, but worse. And a perk that can sometimes be useful? It's also a complete snooze fest though. It just enforces W keying after the gens are done. That's it. So, in total, we have a killer that's so hated to play against it's driving people away from even playing one side of the game, and a set of teachable perks so bad there's no reason to use any of them ever. Unless, like me, you use them for a short while to try and justify your purchase of this DLC. And what has Behaviour done about these issues? Minimal. The Ghoul has been slightly nerfed, but the core issues with the power haven't been tackled, and he's still horrendous to play against. Further, none of his perks have been adjusted in any way. There's no reason to use any of them, but don't worry, you know what Behaviour has instead? More content. A month later we got Steady Pulse, a survivor only chapter. And this is crucial. Survivor only chapters are defined by their teachable perks. They're the only offering of a new chapter in terms of new gameplay. So what did we get here? Well, a healing perk that's just meh. It can be useful, but it's rarely more useful than either botany knowledge or will make it, both of which are available with the base game. Then there's rapid response, which is just bad. I think the goal with it was to help solo queue players with taking protection hits. However, most of the time, the survivor goes down before you can make it to them, assuming, of course, that it's even worth it to take a protection hit in the first place. Then there's duty of care. If you're an experienced and highly coordinated survive with friends squad, you can use this to make protection hits more effective. Everyone else? Get dunked on. So overall, this chapter offers an okay healing perk, but honestly, just use botany knowledge or we'll make it. They're more consistent and can be accessed for free. A poor aura reading perk that can help solo queue players to throw their matches by wasting time and taking unnecessary protection hits, and a decent perk that can be useful, but only for a small portion of players that are both very experienced and highly coordinated. These are truly some of the perks of all time. Has anything been done to make these perks more viable or interesting? Nope. But don't worry, you know what behaviour has instead? More content. A month later, we got perhaps the most anticipated crossover this game has ever seen. Five Nights at Freddy's. Awesome, right? Yesn't. On the one hand, despite the buggy release, the animatronic was a great success. A fun power to play with and against, and a selection of mostly cool add-ons. Well, Cameron, that sounds great, right? Yeah, but the release wasn't perfect. First off are the teachable perks. Here we have meh, bad, and worse. Phantom Fury is okay at best. The lengthy cooldown and lack of control as a killer hardly makes it worth the perk slot. Haywire is, frankly, a terrible design. In the majority of cases, it's not even close to being worth the perk slot. However, on a certain killer, with a certain add-on and a particular strategy in mind, you can hold games hostage. Oh dear. And Help Wanted is an awful perk. Not only for the fact that it isn't really worth the perk slot, but also because it's so absurdly frustrating to try and use. A lesson that should have been learned after the creation of machine learning. Finally, this chapter saw the release of a map that was mostly fine. It had lots of cool references and wasn't yet another killer-sided hellhole. But certain parts of the main building were very safe for survivors, which made some chases as killer quite frustrating. So overall, this chapter was mixed. An awesome new killer, but with some bad perks and a map that needed some tweaks. What did behaviour do to address these issues? Nothing. But don't worry, you know what behaviour has instead? More content. And so, a month later, we received the Walking Dead chapter. This could and should have been a triumphant moment for behaviour. Instead, we got a bug-riddled mess that saw some of the newly added perks kill-switched. At launch. For any update, this would be embarrassing, but to mishandle such a huge IP was almost unbelievable. But the bugs got fixed and everything was great after that, right? Well, no. Again, a survivor-only DLC is entirely defined by the perks on offer. And when you look at the teachable perks on offer here, it's pretty underwhelming. Come and Get Me is incredibly niche and difficult to use. I can honestly say I've never seen anyone get use from it from either perspective. I've never managed to make it work as a survivor, and I'm not even sure anyone's ever bothered to equip it in any of my killer matches. Apocalyptic Ingenuity could have been interesting and powerful, but was ultimately held back by the setup requirements. And his teamwork perk is worse than Self-Preservation, a perk that no one uses. Maybe Michonne has a better selection of perks? Conviction is good, too good in some cases. For the most part it's fine. However, when coupled with other perks and or some teammates, you can make a killer's life miserable. So no, it's not irrelevant, but only because it can be used to bully the killer. Great. Last Stand, when it was finally fixed, became one of the perks of all time. Again, by itself it's not particularly useful, but in conjunction with teammates, you can bully the killer. Lovely. Finally, her teamwork perk only achieves the title of "I'm a tiny bit less niche than Rick's teamwork perk." This really isn't going well, is it? But don't worry guys, there's also a new map, if you can call it that. It's basically another withered isle map with a fancy looking Elwall jungle gym for a main building. I don't want to be rude or blunt, but this map honestly feels like a bare minimum effort. Scott Junn made a great video regarding the introduction of this map, and if I can find the original, I'll link it in the top right, but it basically boils down to this. No new map was listed to release with this update on the anniversary roadmap. There was no new map only mode at release, even though this new feature was used with the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza map when that was released. And this map has nothing unique besides the main building that's essentially a reskinned Elwall jungle gym. Most new maps have several key locations that are unique to that map. This map doesn't. All of these factors lead me to speculate that this map may have simply been a test environment that was turned into a full release map at the last second. I can't confirm any of this, but it certainly seems that way when looking at the available evidence. So let's summarise. This patch introduced a boatload of bugs, so many that Behaviour had to make an official statement and apologise to the community. Then we have 2 perks that are just bad, 2 perks that are insanely niche, and finally 2 perks that are great, if you're trying to bully the killer. Add on to this a map that's only unique feature is a reskinned jungle gym, and you realise that this was a pretty bad DLC release. So what has Behaviour done to remedy these issues since? Nothing. Aside from the bug fixes, this chapter has had no major updates. All of these perks are still the same as they were at release. Except now you can actually use Last Stand. But don't worry. You know what Behaviour has instead? More content. Don't worry though, the release of this DLC was delayed so that Behaviour had more time to improve things. Surely this would result in a better release, right? Sinister Grace is, at the time of writing and editing, still pretty new, so I'm sure things will change. But even so, this DLC is really not great. The Krasu is perhaps one of the most overpowered killers we've ever had. Ever. She's a culmination of many different issues that have plagued other killers' designs in recent years, including undodgeable attacks, mindless pallet vaulting, constant zoning potential, and using mobility to just land on top of a survivor and get a free hit. I have little doubt that this killer will be nerfed in the coming weeks, but even if she is, I don't think it's going to make her more interesting to play as or against, just slightly less painful. Okay, but what about her perks? Well, to be honest dear viewer, it's another blunder. Ravenous is probably the best of her perks, but even still, it's not good. You get a 60-second window of exposed that can shorten 1 or maybe 2 chases. Even when compared to other exposed perks, it's not great. Further, the limited window to get value from this perk encourages slugging, something that Behaviour have said they want to punish with various changes. Overture of Doom is one that I thought would be great, but as it turns out, not really. Not only is the hex easy for survivors to locate once they identify the marked generator, but I've actually had several matches in which the perk didn't even activate. The random placement of the hex means that a random generator is targeted, so it's possible that some niche out of the way generator is targeted and survivors just happen to avoid activating the perk. Wandering Eye is even worse. I'm genuinely not sure what the thought process for this perk was, to be honest. You need to injure a survivor, then chase a different survivor, and if the injured survivor is within 20 meters, you see their aura. But if they're that close, you can probably already hear them. And if you want to see their aura mid-chase, just use one of these perks. What about the survivor though? She's cute. Yeah, and her perks are terrible. Road life requires you to jump through so many hoops it's not even funny. Just use botany knowledge. Ghost Notes is interesting in theory, however it's not that useful in chase, and even if it does help you lose the killer, that just means you're leaving your teammates to be targeted instead. Damn. What about the tambourine perk, Cameron? Yes, dear viewer, it's adorable, but that doesn't make it useful. It's like bardic inspiration, but worse. In the first few matches I genuinely thought it might be bugged, since I didn't notice a significant increase in the rate of skill checks. No one else has mentioned this, so I'm pretty sure it's functioning fine. It's just that the perk is so unimpactful because it's not consistent or useful. Sad, considering how much I love the animation for playing the tambourine. Overall, the new killer is brutally overpowered, and the perks are anywhere between uninteresting and woefully terrible. So what will behaviour do about all this? Only time will tell. But based on the pattern I've hopefully managed to highlight with this video, probably not much. Sure, the Krasu will likely be nerfed with some number changes, but then behaviour will just charge headlong into the next content update. So, at the time of writing, the past year has introduced 3 new killers that need changes or complete reworks, 25 perks that need buffing or reworking, and a few maps that could do with changes. None of this is likely to be changed anytime soon, and behaviour will continue to charge forward into the next update, which just adds more problems that will also go unsolved. Right, Cameron, but these updates have also included buffs, nerfs, and reworks as well. They sure have, dear viewer. Over the past year we've had 2 major killer reworks, Go Next prevention, blood point spending improvements, item reworks, various killer adjustments, dozens of perk updates, and more. But all of this brings to mind the old adage, less is more. At the moment, behaviour are trying to juggle too many things at once. Along with so many content releases, they're also adding new systems, reworking old ones, and making various buffs and nerfs to killers, add-ons, perks, and maps, all of which means that none of these things get the focus and attention they need. The Nightmare rework was, frankly, pretty poor. The killer was made slightly more interesting to play, but his add-ons are still boring, Dream Palette explosions are pointless, and to top it all off, playing against him is just annoying. The ability to project to healing survivors basically forces survivors to wake each other up constantly before healing. It's just deep wounds with a different lick of paint. Of the 92 perk adjustments made during the past year, only a handful were meaningful. Most hardly saw any significant improvement, and, let's be real, even fewer have made their way onto the roster of perks you can actually see people using. The map and key reworks were pretty mediocre as well. The new charges system was interesting, however the other changes felt like a side grade, given that they lost certain functionalities with their changes. Finally, they only have 5 add-ons each. A pretty poor selection that does little to make items more interesting or customizable. Overall, the result wasn't that noticeable. People went from not using them over medkits and toolboxes to not using them over medkits and toolboxes. The point is this. When behaviour make changes, they go for quick and easy solutions that often do little to address the core issues with a killer, perk, or add-on. It all feels bare minimum, and they just introduce an excessive amount of these minimalistic changes that rarely do much to really affect the game or really solve problems. Further, they don't take the time to see how those changes impact the game after release, if at all they do. It's just shipped to live and then they almost immediately move on. Next chapter, next rework, next set of number changes. And this means they can't allocate the time required to finalise and completely polish any of the changes or new content they introduce. So what's the solution? Well, it's like I said previously, dear viewer, less is more. If behaviour released less content in fewer patches per year, they'd have more time to refine the patches they do release. Sure, we wouldn't see 92 perks adjusted in a year, but when perks were adjusted or reworked, they could actually be made viable. We may only see around 20 perks changed in a year, for example, but if those changes were well thought out and impactful, that could be 20 perks really shaking up the meta. As for new content, it would probably affect behaviour's bottom line, but slowing down the release of new content could make the content that is released far more impactful. Taking the time to make sure that a new killer is fun for both sides, that the add-ons are interesting and varied, and that the teachable perks are fun and viable would make content releases far more exciting. To be honest, dear viewer, I wasn't excited for Sinister Grace. It just seemed like more content with a capital C. I hate to use the word, but the perks here are just more slop. Stuff made with little consideration for how interesting, fun, or viable it'll be. Instead, they're just there to fill out slots and fulfill a quota. The release of a new chapter should be exciting, but after this past year of content, I'm honestly feeling far more jaded about future updates. So that's it for this one. This is something that I'm honestly sad to have to talk about, but it really does concern me. Behaviour's approach of quantity over quality is really starting to show, and it makes me worried for the future of this game. If Behaviour aren't willing to put in the time and effort required to bring us new, exciting and impactful updates, I'm afraid that I won't quit this game in a fit of pique. Just that, one day, this game will stop being exciting. That the hollowness of the most recent chapter will be how I feel about all of my experiences in this game. And then, at some point, I simply think, man, I can't be bothered anymore. I sincerely hope that it never comes to that, but I wanted to talk about this all the same. Thank you very much for watching, dear viewer, and hope to see you in the next one.